Is Star Rupture the next Satisfactory? Well, quite simply, no, it's not. And we'll go really into detail as to why shortly. But we could also broaden this question to, is it a good factory game? And even then, I would have to argue that Star Rupture shouldn't be really considered a factory game at all, because it's quite clearly in my mind a sci-fi survival game with factory automation elements. It takes a secondary part. But don't confuse it for a bad game, because it's clearly got a lot of potential, regardless of its rough edges that we've seen in its pre-early access playtest, and I expected nothing less than that going into the playtest. But it does have a lot of improvements that need to be made as it heads to early access, which, if I remember, is planned for the end of this year. So, what is Star Rupture? Well, it's an enthralling new first-person open-world survival game from the makers of Green Hell, where you'll be building bases to help you weather the storm, or more importantly, the star's regular ruptures. Now, these outposts will allow you to extract resources from the planet, then produce them into items that will be shipped off-world via orbital launches to various corporations in return for new technologies and items that will allow you to build better facilities and unlock weapons to help you survive a hostile world filled with aliens. Thankfully though, with 4-player co-op, you'll also be able to work with friends to fight them off. You'll have different classes and presumably with that, different skills accordingly as well. And for the last couple of weeks, there's been this single-player playtest going on, showing the opening few hours of gameplay, and having spent a good few hours playing it, and after a lot of feedback from the community, I thought it high time that I break down my impressions of the game. And I should mention, everyone is entitled to their own opinion, so if you do disagree with me, by all means just let me know in the comments below. But I've been hearing a lot of players' concerns about the similarities between Star Rupture and Satisfactory, and it's fair to say that it's not entirely unjust. The whole landing on a planet, having an AI guide, arachnid enemies, build tools which look similar, and of course sending items off to space for another corporation which obviously doesn't truly care for its pioneers, sorry, I meant prisoners, not to mention it being a first-person game with factory building, would leave very few players not drawing up these similarities. But they also stop at that. Now, I see Satisfactory as this open world factory building game, whereas Star Rupture, as I mentioned, is much more survival focused, whether that's crafting better foods and warding off poisoning to fighting off waves of enemies to keep your facilities running. The game revolves around you trying to survive a hostile world, and yes, you are sending resources off, but so that you can get access to better weapons and technologies such as lems, which allow your character, as they level up, to allocate these lems which add semi-permanent buffs to your character. And I love this idea of automating resources in order to unlock better weapons, because it's against the usual survival tropes which see you find a new resource and suddenly you can build all these new items that are much better. Instead, you're going to be developing better items to send off to space to give you access to better equipment and technology. And then you'll need to explore the world in order to research the recipes in order to produce new items that you'll find later in the game. It's quite a clever approach to survival, and one that I'm personally excited for. After all, I love playing survival games as well as factory games. They're my two favourite genres. But that doesn't mean that I don't have my own concerns about this. I do, and one in particular is a cause of major concern, which we'll cover shortly. Now, going into the playtest, I expected a pre-early access state of development, and needless to say, that's what we got. The user interface is far from great, especially when it comes to factory automation, knowing, for example, how much is being produced per minute and how much is needed to produce that item per minute is a bare minimum. And as it stands, it's really just confusing the way that it's laid out and seeing multiples per second in the UI. Now, when it comes to building, there are definitely some good things to talk about, but I hated having to go back into the build menu every time I wanted to build something, especially when it was a long line of multiple conveyors early on. Speaking of which, though there are better rail unlocks for rail organization later on, I really dislike the rail system. It goes against all that I stand for when building clean factories in Satisfactory, and I find it very difficult to control the level of the rails. They seem to dip even if they're placed along the same level, and that's a constant niggle for me. Now, on top of this, I've gone through the whole playtest not knowing how core overloading really affects your base, as everything still cools down over time, or even knowing that the base core can be upgraded. That's something I found out today, and it's kind of the first thing that you think you should see when you click on the core. And I'm sure all of this will change, but there are other little niggles, such as not being able to build doorways into your hubs in certain places, which led to my unexpected death several times, which led to even more deaths, as after a Star Rupture you have to wait for consumables to regrow. So I died again to thirst and hunger, as all my consumables were on my dead body's inventory. And that was the other side of the map. So perhaps something like allowing us to respawn with enough food and hydration to last until the planet's regeneration would be useful in that case. Now, needless to say, there were occasional bugs, and I don't mean the extraterrestrial kind, which resulted in several crashes. Now, I also felt that the early game progression was a little too slow just for the sake of giving us something to work towards, and whilst exploring, I very much felt the need for some way of travelling faster. It's a large map, and going to and from outpost to outpost is really time consuming. Although with us having regeneration chambers for our sleeves, I really don't see it too far-fetched to have a technology later in the game that would allow us to teleport between outposts. And finally, I feel that there could be a little bit more thought into the controls to allow us to close menus quicker, or have consumable slots which allow us to hotkey and consume items, as well as a few other little movement issues here and there. Now, I know that what I've just listed is quite a lot of minor issues, which I should state I am certain will be improved before their launch into early access, but these aren't major issues that would stop me playing the game. They don't make the game unenjoyable in any way, it's just adding a little friction to my playtime. And even then, there is plenty of things that Star Rupture does well. As I mentioned, the survival mixed with automation works really well, and the world of Star Rupture looks fantastic. With each rupture, we're also given a reason to go out and explore. It's like a day-night cycle, so you can find different resources immediately after the rupture. Also, I like that progression is tied to exploration, because that way there's always a reason to go out and find new recipes to unlock. And as you explore, you'll also find interesting lore that will give you a better understanding of the world that you live in. Building is simple and easy when it works, that is, and in many ways feels very similar to Subnautica given its modular style. I also really enjoyed the combat, which I wasn't expecting. It seems very fluid. Although I will state that the grenade cooldown could do with some love. I feel it's tied to possibly killing enemies, but it's so slow it's virtually useless when it comes to its cooldown. Now, though I've yet to experience any kind of wave defense with my Satisfactories to the level of Factorio, I do look forward to there being a bit more of a challenge, and the fact that the aliens only temporarily pause building production rather than actually destroy buildings was a great call from the team in my opinion, and I'm really excited to jump into this with a couple of friends for a playthrough. This really excites me as a multiplayer game, but there is one big issue that sits firmly in my mind, and that's the replay value from this. As it stands, I feel it would be great for a single playthrough, but after that, what will bring us back to the game? They've teased different game modes, but I'm not sure how much draw that would bring me to play the game again. Take for example, Satisfactory. The beauty of it is that you can replay the game over and over and never build the same factory twice. For me, it's very much about aesthetics and the freedom to build huge factories with different style logistics, and I just don't see Star Rupture doing that for me. So though I could, yes, build different facilities in different areas, it's not for visual appeal, just solely a different production line in a different place. But this is something that Factorio actually does very well, because though your facilities all look similar, they all use the most efficient layouts possible, the replay value comes in the form of the procedurally generated world on top of the different custom game options that it has. This is something Star Rupture needs to have planned out at the end of its early access launch later this year, or I just feel that this will become something like a flash in the pan kind of game, and I don't think that will do justice for it. But regardless, let me know your thoughts, whether you agree or disagree, or perhaps offer your own suggestions as to where the replay value could come from with this. But thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much to all of our incredible supporters on Patreon, most notably our Lunar Eclipse Patreons, Firefless the Calamity, Ben and Star, and our Blood Moon of the day, which today is Brain Slug. Until next time, as always, ciao for now.